tickets.
Well, actually,
Okay, tonight.
If it's not tomorrow, give me till tomorrow so I can actually look back over that proclamation.
yeah, sure.
Okay.
The other thing I think had to do with Ben Griffith going to this conference that he's going to next week.
Okay.
So Hoops has a couple of questions about that.
Okay. That's good. Lynn, what conference has Ben going to? What conference has Ben going to?
Is someone commenting in?
Yeah, Demery's got a conference in. He can't be here in person.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, is Mr. Perkins still here? I saw him earlier.
Maybe I should talk to you actually about the city planners conference. He's going to. We're planning to do a story about it actually. Since you remember we did one on the municipal league conference that you guys went to, or rather that.
I texted Barrett Parker to see if he's in there.
Well, anyway, whenever.
Got my message. I've just texted him to ask.
All right. Gentlemen, how you doing this evening?
Good.
To see all
How are
y'all. Doing good. Alderman Wong, good to see you. Sit down. Good.
All right, we got two matters to cover tonight. The first, we're going to hear a presentation from Taylor Adams in a minute on public-private partnerships, and then after Taylor's presentation is done, we are going to conference Demery Grubbs in for a very brief call. Talked to Demery this afternoon, and he said won't take long at all. He just needs to briefly explain what he has done with your capital improvement plan projects list, what the next steps with a rescoring of those lists is, and then a work session to follow to figure out how to implement the list. So at this point, I'll introduce Taylor and tell you a little bit about why he's here tonight. I heard something recently that I thought was a good piece of advice, and it was unrelated to this, but it applies to this. And somebody said, anytime you undertake something, one of two things should happen. Either you should find success, or in the alternative, you should look for lessons that can be learned from what you just did. I think in the case of our endeavor to address our municipal facility needs, obviously the recent bond issue was not successful, so we should look for lessons to be learned from that and how we move forward. Now, in the aftermath of the bond issue not passing, I gave a great deal of thought as to what some of the things we learned from that experience were. And I think one of the things that stood out to me was that there was widespread recognition that something has to be done with the current condition of our municipal facilities. In fact, even some of the most outspoken critics of the bond issue recognized that there was a need to address the failing condition of our municipal facilities. Now, as I look at the reasons that the bond issue didn't pass, there are two resounding themes that stand out. There were many reasons that people expressed opposition to me about it, but there were two overwhelming themes that I picked up on. One was many viewed the cost of the project that was presented as being too high. And the second was that it carried with it a tax increase. Now those are somewhat related, but different points. And I think those were two major reasons that bond issue didn't pass. So if you take all of that together, I think it leaves us with a monumental challenge from here. And that is that we've got to strive to meet a need that is widely recognized as important to the future of the city. And we must look for ways to lower the cost of meeting that need and ultimately seek a way to finance such a project without having a tax increase. Now that is not easy to do at all. Not long after the bond issue, I had a very fortunate meeting with Taylor Adams. We actually just bumped into each other at an event. Taylor expressed concern over what we were going to do and how we move forward with this project, and I talked through many of the points that I just expressed with him. Taylor actually works in government building procurement, so he has an interesting perspective on these things. He said, something you should really look at is the opportunity for public-private partnerships in building municipal facilities. I said, well, that's interesting. And the more we talked about it, and the more he explained some of the opportunities with public-private partnerships, the more interesting it got to me. Public-private partnerships can offer a way not only to lower the cost of a government building project, but they can also offer potential economic development opportunities, private development opportunities associated with a government building project. That seems to have a lot of upside. Now, I took it a step further with Taylor. I said, well, you've got this expertise, and you are, a citizen that's very interested in seeing your community succeed. Would you be willing to help? Taylor has expressed that he is more than willing to serve as a resource for the city, and he is not looking to be paid for any responsibility that he may have with the city. So what I thought would be a good starting point to determine if we would like to utilize Taylor as a resource is for him to come in tonight to make a presentation on public-private partnerships, and then for us to have some dialogue, open the floor to questions and comments from the members of the board. Taylor?
While I set this up, just take a moment to thank you all for having me this evening, and something you probably don't hear enough, thank you all for your willingness to serve our community and lead us forward. Honored to be with you this evening. Get this started. And I think like everyone, or like most in the community, I'm sort of struggling with these weather changes, so if you all will forgive me for occasionally grabbing a sip of water as we go through this. Tonight I'll move over here so that you all don't have to go back and forth between me and the screen. Tonight we're looking basically at just sort of an informational proposal, as the mayor said, and again, thank you, Mr. Mayor, for dealing with what are these things called public-private partnerships. In reality, there are about 9 different types of public-private partnerships that are recognized by the federal government, which has trickled its way down to states throughout the United States, or throughout our country. And what we're talking about here specifically would relate to construction. But just a little about me and why I'm here. I'm a certified public purchasing officer. This is the executive certification associated with governmental procurement. It's the highest certification in the field. MAGPA is the Mississippi Association of Governmental Purchasing and Property Agents. That's the Mississippi chapter of NIGP. NIGP, up until this year, stood for the National Institute of Governmental Procurement. However, now that we operate through a partnership with SIPs in about 60 countries around the world, we've had to drop the national piece because, well, people sort of associate that with the U.S. and we're an international organization now. But I'm the president of the Mississippi chapter of NIGP. I've served on the executive board for 3 years, and I also chair our legislative action initiative. And why that's relevant here, because the purchasing person for the city of Starkville is a member of MAGPA. You all sort of included in her membership or consulting services for your city. And of course, that's provided gratis up to the point where we elevate it to the next level, and that's where I would refer you to the national organization. But for the scope of this project, MAGPA, our board is more than comfortable with me continuing to offer service in whatever capacity the city might ask me to, especially since I live here and they're not going to have any travel costs associated with it, that we can do that on an ongoing basis. Here's a little information just sort of about NIGP. It is the Institute for Public Procurement globally. And in addition to being the president of MAGPA, I'm serving my second term on the Institute's Policy and Position Committee. So all that means to you all is that in addition to sort of speaking intelligently, I hope, about public procurement in the state of Mississippi, I also have a small hand in sort of shaping policy at a higher level. But moving on into what we're here to talk about tonight, what is a public-private partnership? Very simply, it's a contractual agreement in any capacity between a public agency, federal, state, or local, and a private sector entity. Through this agreement, the skills and assets of each sector are shared in delivering a service or facility for the use of the general public. We hope the sharing of resources, by the sharing of resources, each party shares in the risks and rewards potential in the delivery of the service and/or facility. That's generally what we're talking about. Just a little short list of places in addition to sort of just regular old building construction, although I don't think there's anything regular about this process that we're talking about. I listed transportation first with regard to where these types of arrangements have been used, because if you look around the United States, public-private partnership is used heavily in the construction of roads, bridges, things of that nature. It's also used for water and wastewater. There's a great example of this in Gulfport, in our own state. Urban development, energy, financial management, and school systems, though you'll see in a minute, school buildings at the primary and secondary level are eliminated by statute in Mississippi, but there is a precedent for use, particularly in the state of Virginia. The next question, is it legal? It is. This is sort of a long section of the code, but we'll reference section 1 here in bold. The counties and municipalities of the state are authorized to lease publicly owned real property to any corporation, partnership, limited partnership, joint venture, or individual for the purpose of enabling such person to construct or renovate thereon any of the buildings or facilities described in 31.8.1, and in italics here I've given you a listing of those. We'll come back to that in just a second. And then to lease such buildings and facilities to the county or municipality. No such ground lease shall be for a primary term in excess of the primary term of the lease with respect to the buildings and facilities to be constructed thereon. So what you can see I just read that just because I know that it's sort of probably hard to read that from the other side of the room. There is some standing to allow for this. The public buildings that are listed in section 31.8.1, public buildings, courthouses, office buildings, jails, auditoriums, community centers, civic arts centers, public libraries, gymnasiums, and then machinery and equipment associated with those structures. So there is, as we can see here clearly, there is standing. Of course, Chris would verify that if you all chose to go forward before you went in that direction, but nonetheless, I thought we'd reference the code just here to answer, to hopefully clear that up on the front end. What are the advantages to you, the city? As we mentioned in the definition, our goal here is to maximize each sector's strengths, and we'll talk about a listing of whatever we brings to the table in just a moment. It reduces developmental risk. I'm not going to read all these, just sort of hit the high points. Sort of key for the city as we're working towards tax neutrality. Reduction in the basic public investment on the front end. I think this is a real opportunity for the city, mobilizing excess or underutilized assets. Improves efficiency because it allows us to let the private sector do what they do best, and that's innovate. Improve service to the community, the share of resources and the mutual rewards that both entities experience. What are the disadvantages? And speaking to those, tendering and negotiation can be more difficult. These contracts are typically more complicated than the traditional IFBs, invitations for or invitations to bid, depending on where you are in the country, that we see in governmental procurement. The contract renegotiation can be a real threat. It's difficult to look sometimes 10, 15, 20, 30 years down the road and understand all of the potential contingencies that we will face. Performance enforcement can be difficult. We'll talk about some ways to avoid that, to avoid the pitfalls associated with that in a moment. but I think it's relevant to reference that here. And then finding common language. And this is sort of a weird statement. I want to speak to this. It says finding the balance between transparency and profit. If you look at the cases surrounding public-private partnership, where oftentimes they have failed is that the two sides have not had the ability to get on the same page. In government, transparency sort of comes before all else. In governmental procurement, we say we are in the transparency and accountability business. That's what we do. If nothing else, our goal is to bring transparency to every acquisition because we're spending the people's money. Clearly, the motive in the private sector is to generate a profit. When these have been successful, that common language and common understanding of each side's position has been achieved, and we're able to find a going forward point and do great things. But this is perhaps the most important thing to address on the front end and the biggest potential pitfall. And that's why in the next slide, I want to talk about what each party brings to the table, because this is sort of where this common language develops. It's in finding sort of the win-wins for both sides to steal the mayor's stolen Stephen Covey statement. Speaking to the public sector first, legal authority, protection of the procurement legal authority and then protection of procurement policies are two key points that the government can bring as we are ultimately spending the taxpayers' money. A much broader perspective, because if you're dealing in solely with profit and profit motive, it becomes very difficult to understand the broad needs of the general public. The government's very good at that because, well, you all have to deal with the public every day. Our personnel are dedicated but constrained. Why are they dedicated? They're dedicated because this is the building out of which they'll operate. But they're constrained in the sense that we're a partner and not the true owner. And then also you have the capital resources. In this situation, the biggest resource is land. I mean, there's a potentially available real estate out of which this agreement and partnership can grow. On the private sector side, it's the sharing of resources, and the easiest resource to share for the private sector is money. And clearly that's what we're talking about and a real need in this situation if we're going to achieve the tax neutral status for a project like this that the mayor mentioned. The management efficiencies, because they do operate in a profit mode all the time, it is in their best interest to operate efficiently as they possibly can. The same would be true of newer technologies, workplace efficiencies, cash flow management, and then personnel development. Generally, in government, it is difficult for us to understand the full range of personnel required for a project of this scope, and that can make our evaluation more difficult when we're looking at proposals along this way. One of the great savings that the private sector can bring to this sort of arrangement is they know their people. They know what they're capable of, and they know how to get from point A to point B within the scope of what they do. Much better than we can saying, okay, we're going to put this solicitation out and hope that we get what we're after. The keys, just to sort of sum this up, and I've tried to move quickly because I know that you all have a lot to do. The right statutory and political environment is key. I think we've established that the statute, that what we're talking about is allowable by statute, but certainly the political environment is something that you all would want to consider. An organized structure, a strong team that's dedicated to the project, but also a complete understanding of best value procurement methodology. Sort of key one of the real keys on government side to making a project like this work. A detailed business plan, be goal-oriented, establish milestones, and this is key for any program of this size. We want to know, generally by the time the proposals come in, we'll know where we're trying to go. We need to know what steps are important and in the time frame by which they need to be achieved to know that we're heading there in the time that, within our allowable time frame. Risk allocation, dispute resolution methodology. the guarantee of a revenue stream through existing cash flow or some of these other methods that are listed there. Stakeholder support is obviously a key to any program like this in government. And then it's incumbent on government to pick its partner carefully and know that you're selecting a partner that can deliver exactly what it is that you're asking for. How difficult is this process to execute? It's not easy. It is more difficult than traditional procurement. However, we've consistently seen in the marketplace that the rewards, and not just from the tax neutral advantages that you can bring to a community, but also from the quality of the end product. We've seen time and time again that this works and that there is a road to success. But before you begin, there are a few things that need to be hashed out. General concept, or a general design concept, obviously you need to have at least a broad idea of what you're asking for. You need an evaluation of the value of the publicly held lands that are in play. I think that's key. And I would add to that their potential uses. Evaluation of the market potential, including any tax revenues that can be generated to reinforce your funding position. And then an RFPP, and you've all heard RFPP. You've all heard RFP, I'm sure. We're talking about a slightly different process called RFPP, and we'll talk about that in just a second, to select and design your construction team. Sort of the deliverables that you would potentially get from me if you chose to go down this road would be some help in putting together your document. Clearly, that procurement methodologies piece can be difficult if you don't have sort of people that have worked in this capacity before. So I'm going to transition away from the actual PowerPoint of this because that's sort of difficult to read. And I'm just going to open a Word file for a couple of this is what a sample document would look like. This is in no way something that the city's bound. I'm going to stay over here so I can scroll down. Certainly, this is yours. This is yours if you want it, or you can throw it away if you want it. It should serve as an adequate template should you decide to go forward. Speaking to the RFPP, you see instead of a request for proposal, this is a request for partnership proposal. Oftentimes, this proposal would be done, if you were to look around the country, you would see that two-step processes are often followed, a request for qualifications followed by a request for proposal. Given the scope of this work, I don't know that that's necessary here, but just to sort of give you the same layer of protection, I added for you a qualification document that would fit in with your main proposal. And that's this. The question, this is a sort of a just 3-page document that any potential firm wanting to submit a proposal on this work would fill out. And again, this is yours as well, should you want it or not want it. It's just available to you to have to work through. But it's one of those that offers the city some additional layer of protection so that going forward you know that that basically the potential firm that you're dealing with can deliver the services you're requesting. That is the bulk of what I've got. I'd be delighted to take any, like I say, I moved through that fairly quickly knowing that you all had a busy night. I'd be delighted to take any questions on the issue at this point.
Questions or comments for Taylor?
No. Taylor, can you provide any examples of public-private partnerships in the state or region that might help provide a template for what you're proposing?
And can I tag on to Richard's question and ask if this is a trend you're seeing?
Great questions, yes. And Richard, let me apologize. I intended to bring a number of cases with me to just as leave behinds for you all, and it's no excuse other than I ran out of the office without them, and certainly we'll bring those to you. Okay. Sandra, to your question first, yes, this is the coming trend in sort of public procurement. We see this, as tends to be the case, as you all know, these things sort of pop up on the coast somewhere and work their way in. I looked at a number of projects in the state that the state of Virginia has executed. This is sort of the preferred method of sort of educational acquisition in the state of Virginia these days, according to a couple of people that I spoke with this morning. The city of Gulfport, Mr. Core, excuse me, to your question, yes, has executed a project. Locally, you could say that the Cotton Mills project would qualify as public-private partnership, as well as looking on campus in another capacity. Something that's turned into a great revenue generator on campus. The dining services contract is clearly an example of a private company operating government assets in a for-profit model and sharing in the wealth or sharing in the benefit that generates with the university. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Do we have any further questions?
So I guess procedurally, RFPP would be the mechanism to call for information.
Given where you are and the size and scope of a potential project here, I think it's more than adequate. We're sort of to do a one-step versus two-step process. RFPP is probably the only way forward that, and I may be wrong on this, but based on sort of what I've looked at in putting this together, that seems to be the only way forward that would both speak to the statute, but also bring the correct amount of fairness and transparency to the process.
Is there, are there costs associated with an RFPP like there are with the proposals, or is it fee neutral like a qualifications?
There would be cost to firms submitting a proposal, but not to the city. But what you would find is for firms that are working that are accustomed to working in this space, those costs are not they're not prohibitive.
Obviously, the city clerk's office here handles procurement issues for the city, so I presume that one of the things you would do would be work closely with the city clerk to make sure that everything fits with their processes and procedures and going forward.
I mean, assuming you all want, yes.
I'll get to that.
Yeah, want me to. Certainly, yes. I mean, we don't want to do anything that's going to bring a great deal of heartburn
Okay.
to the folks that you have on the ground now. Our goal would be to offer process consulting and support and understanding that this is a fairly complex solicitation to run and then document to generate any support that was needed in that capacity. We'd be glad to provide.
And I think the remainder of my question would be, are there other ways that you could help, and what would our next steps be if we decided to go this route?
I think, sir, first to the next step, I mean, obviously, I think it's incumbent on you all to decide if this is something, if this is a process in which you find value. And something I did not mention in the proposal, but should have, and coming back to Mr. Dumas's question, as this is as there is no cost to the city in running the solicitation. And I say, what is no cost? I mean, there certainly are some administrative costs in the time that your purchasing or procurement staff would have putting the solicitation out there. But but at any point, up until the contract is signed, the city can walk away, no harm, no foul. And I think that's important to understand, that just by running the solicitation and going through the process, you're in no way obligated to fully execute the project. It's like anything. If you solicit bids, you open them up, the pricing is beyond what you can do, you reject and start over, or reject and walk away, reassess, whatever. But nonetheless, I think it's important that we say, first of all,
that the city basically has the ability to walk away at any point. So, to the question of a next step, you all would need to determine if this was something, if you wanted to go down this road, basically, and at that point, we would need to organize. We would need to first hone in on a site. Clearly, I mean that's going to be key, because you'll need to give any firm that's going to submit a proposal at least some guidance as to what the site is. And then we'd start working on developing what would become the final document, and most importantly, identifying the project team. That's something that would certainly be up to you all to determine. But once we had that, we would be fairly close with I think the document that I've sort of already put together for you to run the solicitation and see what we get. A next step as it relates to me, I mean, it's the work is gratis because of your relationship, because of the city's relationship with MAGPA. You probably do want to retain either me or the purchasing association in some capacity, just so that you know what your deliverables are, and that can be a fairly loose memo if that's the direction that you want to go, but we're more than delighted to serve in whatever capacity we can. Does that answer your
I
question?
think it does.
Further questions, comments? Any further questions for Ted? Any further questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Taylor.
Thank you. Again, thank you all for letting me do this and make this presentation, and just know that I'm available to you in whatever capacity you need me. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, at this time, we'll shift gears, and we need to get Demery on the phone. Now, you were all emailed Demery's list of 79 projects that were taken from the scores that you put on the original list that you compiled. Do you all have that? Did you put copies at the desk?
I asked Shantae to do that, but we'll go get them, sure. Maybe on her desk.
Okay. All right, in the meantime, we'll get Demery on the phone. Now, Demery has told me this is going to be a very short discussion. He just needs to tell you how he has pared the previous list down and what the next steps will be working towards adopting a capital improvement plan.
Can I be excused for just a second? You're welcome.
Thank you, Ted. Thank you. That's nice. That's what Deborah said, so.
I always wanted to try that. What's that online meeting? Go to meeting? Yeah, I wanted to try. I've used it.
You got a lot of meetings with your building folks.
Denver.
Yes.
This is Joel Clements with the City of Starkville. I have the board here waiting to talk to you.
All right, good.
Hey, Demery, and we're waiting on Lynn to actually bring the list in. The board's seen all of the lists by email, but they don't have a hard copy in front of them. I guess if you want to go ahead, just explain how we've gotten to where we are now, starting from them submitting their original list,
Okay.
and then how it was pared down and where we'll go from here.
Okay. I'm sorry I can't be there. First of all, I apologize. I have a daughter in North Carolina who has some health issues, and I've been up there and didn't fly in until about 4:30 today, so it was impossible for me to get there, and I apologize. Appreciate you letting me talk to you by phone. We started this process off with y'all identifying all the capital needs that y'all had done collectively as a group. We consolidated them. Y'all graded the first series of capital improvements that we had, and we have pared it down now to 79 projects and reduced it from 130-something projects to 79 projects. What we have to do one more time, this should be our final time to grade, we have to take these 79 projects and we have to grade them one more time with A's, B's, and C's, A being the most important, B being the next important, and C being the less important. There are 79 projects that y'all have identified. We need 27 A's, 27 B's, and 25 C's. B, and C, as so indicated, then we'll get back with y'all immediately, and then we'll start doing we're going to have a couple of detailed work sessions and walk through these projects and break each project down, and we'll end up with a workable list, and it's going to be your choice of what that list looks like. I'm not going to dictate 20 projects or 12 projects or 13 or 20. That's something, once we get our workable list, we can determine how many y'all want to have on a capital plan. And any questions y'all got at this point of me?
Questions for Demery?
When do you need it?
I would love to have these things within 2 weeks. If we could have them in 2 weeks, then we could start having a work session before the end of the year. We could have our work session one work session before the end of the year.
Okay, so that'd be December 6th. Are y'all all comfortable?
Well, we'd be sometime probably after 6, because I'm not sure we can get them all back by then.
No, that'd be the due date, when the board members would get them back to the office, and then we'd get them to you.
Yeah, if we could get them back by the 6th, that would be wonderful. And then what we could do is send y'all a list of the 50-something projects that have been identified, and then we'll set up a work session from there after the 6th. It won't take us but a day. If we could get them all back on the 6th, I could have them tabulated that week and everything back to y'all, and then we could have a work session. And we're going to need to have a special call meeting there, because it's going to be hard to do this during a regular board meeting.
Okay. Okay.
But we could do that sometime between, before the 20th of December or something like that. We could have a good work session and really get a jump on this thing, and right after the first year, finish up on it.
So we'll work on getting those submitted either to Shantea or Lynn by December 6th. Then we'll compile, Shantea will compile the list and get them to you.
Yeah, if we can do that, we'll have back to you that week, and then we'll have our work session.
Okay.
All right?
Do we have any more questions for Demery while we've got him? Any more questions for Demery? All right, Demery, looks like you're off the hook.
Well, no, I'm not on the hook. I'm trying to get on the hook so we can get it done.
Well, we appreciate all your help.
All right, no problem. I look forward to getting the results back from y'all, and we'll get you a consolidated list, okay?
Okay, thanks a bunch.
All right, bye-bye.
All right. That's all I've got, Dale.
Can I make one quick?
What about, like, when a project, I'm sorry, Tony, I'm sorry, I cut right into
You did cut right in front of me. I just had a comment I wanted to make to the board up here. When we were putting together our lists, I think that there may have been some projects that were left off the list out of oversight, and just simply that, oversight. Because we have a street list already, and because we have some drainage projects on a capital improvements list already, there may have been some things that we thought would come in through that process. And I'm sure at some point, those lists have to be blended with this list to come up with a complete capital improvements project. But as we're thinking forward about what we're going to do, there are 4 or 5 streets in the city of Starkville that remain unpaved in the sense that they are still gravel streets. Most of those, some of those are actually in the county but are extensions of city streets. Some, but there are 4 or 5 streets within the city of Starkville, a lot of which I think came from the 98 annexed territories, where there are parts or entire streets that are gravel, that have no sort of paved surface at all. And I think it's incumbent upon us, as we've talked about providing services to those 98 annexed territories and sort of wrapping up our obligation to those annexed territories, that we think about those streets too, even though they may not be on this list that we're looking at tonight.
Do you recall if all of those streets are on the street improvement plan that we have?
I do not. Do you, Edward?
Yeah.
I do not.
Okay, so that would be something, because at some point when y'all get into the process of doing the heavy lifting on this, he's going to have to take that street improvement plan and the drainage improvement plan and
Right.
work those projects in with this one, and y'all are going to have to create a blended document that has everything in it.
But at some point, I would like to have that opportunity to wrap those streets in, because I think they're not on here simply out of oversight.
Okay. Further questions or comments?
Like the Lynn Lane multi-use path on here twice. One it's on here as a matching funds for grant, and then the other way it's on here as 1.5 million. So project number 5,
Yep.
I guess that would mean you would want to do it regardless if it was a grant or not.
No. The grant is in process.
Right.
Y'all have committed to pursuing that. So it'd be the matching funds portion. Demery's not familiar with these projects. He just takes them through his program. And what happened, I'm sure, is somebody put that project down for its total cost. And then somebody put that project down for the actual city contribution that would be required, and it cycled through the list like that.
Because you don't want to waste an A or a B on it twice.
So should we scratch 5?
Right.
You've also got to acquire Bluefield, which.
Yeah, that needs to be stricken.
There's several things on here that, and Maple Drive is not on here.
Yeah, y'all may want to do some edits. I'll tell you what. If you have any edits that are totally just clerical in nature, something is duplicated or something's already been done, take the next couple of days, go through the list and get me a markup so I can have a conversation with him on what we did with those.
And I know we applied for the STIP for the next round. When do you hear about all the STIP stuff?
I asked them about once a month, and they keep telling me it's based on the federal transportation dollars, that they're not getting any word from Congress on how those monies are gonna come down to the state. So they're kind of in a holding pattern until the federal funds are released. So those STIP funds are federal dollars. So to answer your question, I don't know.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's all right.
Further questions or comments? Any further questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I think that concludes this work session. Thank you all for being here.